Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we begin an immersive journey into the Washington Quarter Dollar, a coin so deeply embedded in everyday American life that its true story often goes unnoticed. Yet behind its familiar face lies a narrative filled with history, symbolism, economic change, artistic debate, and cultural continuity. Because the Washington Quarter was not simply created to serve commerce, but to represent stability at a moment when the United States desperately needed reassurance, first appearing in 1932 during the Great Depression as a commemorative honoring the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, a time when unemployment, uncertainty, and social strain defined daily existence for millions, and the decision to place Washington's portrait on a circulating coin marked a major philosophical shift in American coinage, moving away from symbolic representations of liberty and classical imagery toward the celebration of a real historical leader, whose legacy embodied endurance, sacrifice, and unity. And this shift was not without controversy, as artists, historians, and officials debated how Washington should be portrayed, ultimately selecting a design inspired by Jean-Antoine Houdon's sculpture, which conveyed realism and calm authority rather than idealized heroism, and as the coin entered circulation it quickly became more than a commemorative. It became a constant companion to everyday life, exchanged in grocery stores, train stations, factories, and farms, silently witnessing the struggles of a nation rebuilding itself. And behind the scenes the U.S. Mint faced enormous pressure to produce vast quantities efficiently, often prioritizing speed over perfection, which resulted in noticeable variations in strike quality, surface detail, and overall appearance depending on mint location, die condition, and year of production. And these subtle differences would later become critical for collectors, because they reveal the story of industrial production under strain, where worn dies softened Washington's hair details, weak strikes flattened the eagle's breast feathers, and bag storage left marks that forever altered pristine surfaces. And as the years progressed through the 1930s and into the 1940s, the Washington Quarter evolved alongside the nation, carrying the weight of World War II, wartime rationing, and material prioritization, all while maintaining its silver composition, which tied its intrinsic value directly to global metal markets, making it both a medium of exchange and a store of tangible worth. And this dual identity shaped how people viewed the coin, not just as change, but as something worth saving, passing down, or setting aside. And as mintages climbed into the tens of millions, few could have imagined that survival, not production, would one day define rarity, because high circulation, melting, and careless handling quietly erased countless examples, leaving behind a population far smaller than original numbers suggest. And this reality transforms the Washington Quarter into a lesson in numismatics itself, teaching that history is not preserved intentionally but selectively, shaped by human behavior, economic forces, and time. And as collectors today study these coins, they are not merely cataloging dates and mint marks, but reading the physical record of a nation's journey, etched into silver through wear, luster, and design nuance. And this is why the Washington Quarter continues to captivate, because it proves that even the most ordinary object can carry extraordinary meaning when viewed through the lens of history, patience, and understanding. The Washington Quarter's identity deepened as the years moved forward because this coin did not remain frozen in its original moment of creation. Instead, it evolved alongside the nation itself, absorbing the pressures, priorities, and realities of each passing decade. And as the 1930s gave way to the 1940s, production demands increased dramatically due to wartime needs, forcing the U.S. Mint to strike quarters at an unprecedented pace, which resulted in coins that often displayed weak strikes, flat details, and uneven surfaces. Yet these imperfections are precisely what make each piece a historical document today, because they reflect urgency, scarcity, and industrial strain rather than artistic failure. And collectors who examine early Washington Quarters closely begin to notice how mint marks tell silent stories, with Denver and San Francisco issues frequently exhibiting softer strikes compared to Philadelphia counterparts, not due to lack of skill but due to equipment limitations and metal flow challenges. And these subtle characteristics become essential clues for understanding originality, authenticity, and true condition, especially when evaluating higher-grade examples where surface preservation and strike quality must align perfectly. And as silver continued to define the series, the quarter remained intrinsically valuable in a way modern coinage no longer is, giving it a weight and presence that people subconsciously respected, which is why so many were saved unintentionally in drawers, jars, and bankrolls long before collectors realized what they had. And this accidental preservation created a fascinating imbalance where some dates survive in surprising quantities while others, despite similar mintages, are exceptionally difficult to locate in high grades. And this uneven survival rate is what transforms the Washington Quarter from a simple circulating coin into a complex puzzle for numismatists, where knowledge matters more than assumptions. Because mintage numbers alone fail to tell the full story, and as decades passed and the post-war boom reshaped American society, the quarter continued to circulate heavily, enduring vending machines, parking meters, toll booths, and countless daily transactions, all of which contributed to surface wear, bag marks, and contact abrasions that now separate ordinary examples from truly exceptional survivors. And when silver was finally removed from circulating quarters in the mid-1960s, it marked not an end but a transformation, because the earlier silver issues instantly became relics of a bygone monetary system, sparking hoarding, melting, and long-term disappearance that permanently altered the population landscape. And this shift elevated the Washington quarter into a new role, no longer just change but history in hand, prompting collectors to reassess what had once been overlooked. And today, when a high-quality silver Washington quarter surfaces with original luster, strong strike, and minimal marks, it stands as evidence of survival against overwhelming odds, a coin that escaped circulation abuse, economic melting, and decades of neglect, making it valuable not only in monetary terms but as a testament to preservation. And this layered complexity is why the Washington quarter commands respect among collectors, because it rewards those who study deeply, observe patiently, and understand that greatness in numismatics is often hidden beneath familiarity, waiting for someone willing to look closer. As the Washington quarter moved deeper into circulation and time progressed beyond its commemorative origins, the coin began to reflect not only the face of a founding father but the evolving priorities and pressures of the United States itself, because every year of production carried subtle changes that mirrored economic conditions, technological limitations, and national events, and these changes, though often invisible to casual observers, are what give the series its immense depth and lasting appeal among collectors. As the 1930s gave way to the 1940s, the nation found itself consumed by World War II, and the demand for coinage increased sharply as industrial production surged and workers relied heavily on physical currency, forcing the mints to prioritize quantity over artistic refinement, resulting in Washington quarters that often show softer strikes, weaker eagle feathers, and less defined facial features, especially from certain mints where dies were pushed beyond their ideal lifespan. And this period teaches an essential lesson about the series, that perfection was never the goal, survival and function were, and yet these so-called imperfections are precisely what make each coin unique, because they capture a moment when efficiency outweighed aesthetics, and when metal discs carried the weight of a nation at war, and as silver remained the core composition of the quarter, its intrinsic value continued to quietly rise beneath the surface, unnoticed by most at first, but increasingly important as decades passed. And this silver content connected the coin's fate to global markets, economic cycles, and investor behavior, long before the public truly understood the implications. And when the post-war boom ushered in a new era of prosperity, Washington quarters flowed freely through an expanding economy, becoming symbols of stability, routine, and normalcy. Used in jukeboxes, parking meters, laundromats, and vending machines, embedding themselves into everyday American life in ways that few coins ever achieve. And yet even during this time of abundance, the seeds of future scarcity were being planted, because high mintages did not guarantee high survival in pristine condition, as bag marks, careless handling, and constant circulation ensured that truly untouched examples remained rare. And collectors today quickly learned that finding a Washington quarter with full detail, strong luster, and minimal abrasions from this era is far more challenging than mintage figures suggest. And this disconnect between quantity produced and quality preserved is what transforms the Washington quarter from an ordinary coin into a nuanced historical artifact, because it forces us to reconsider how we define rarity, value, and importance. And as the 1960s approached, the rising price of silver began to reshape public behavior, leading to widespread hoarding and melting of silver coins, an irreversible event that dramatically reduced the surviving population of earlier Washington quarters, particularly those from the 1930s and 1940s. And this moment marked a silent turning point, when coins once dismissed as common suddenly became finite, and the Washington quarter crossed an invisible threshold from circulating money into historical collectible. And this transformation was not orchestrated by the mint or predicted by collectors, but driven by economic reality, human instinct, and market forces, proving once again that the true story of a coin is written not only at the moment of its creation, but through the countless decisions made long after it leaves the mint, decisions that determine whether it survives, disappears, or emerges decades later as a treasured link to the past. The deeper story of the Washington quarter dollar unfolds when attention shifts from broad history into the fine-grained realities of minting, circulation, and survival, because while millions upon millions of these coins were struck year after year, very few were ever meant to survive in pristine condition, and that reality is what quietly transformed an everyday object into a serious collectible. As the U.S. Mint operated under relentless pressure to produce vast quantities at high speed, resulting in coins that often left the presses with weak strikes, muted details, and surfaces already vulnerable to abrasion before they even entered circulation, and once released, quarters were stored in heavy canvas bags, transported in bulk, and poured into counting machines, each step adding marks, nicks, and friction that stripped away original luster. Meaning that true high-grade examples today are not merely old coins but survivors of an unforgiving industrial process, and this is especially evident when comparing quarters from different mint facilities, because Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco each displayed distinct production characteristics shaped by equipment quality, die life management, and workforce experience, leading to subtle but important differences in strike sharpness, surface texture, and overall eye appeal. And collectors who learn to see these differences begin to understand that the Washington Quarter is not a single uniform series but a complex tapestry of micro-variations, where even the angle of Washington's jawline or the clarity of the eagle's feathers can reveal whether a coin was struck early or late in a die's life, and this understanding becomes even more critical when examining coins from periods of intense national strain, such as wartime years, when metal supply, labor shortages, and urgent demand forced the mint to prioritize output over artistry, resulting in coins that reflect speed and necessity rather than precision. Yet even these imperfect strikes carry historical weight, because they are physical evidence of a nation operating under pressure, and as decades passed, the quarter's silver content quietly anchored it to global economic forces, tying its fate to fluctuations in precious metal markets. A connection that dramatically altered the series in the mid-1960s when rising silver prices triggered widespread hoarding and melting, as people suddenly realized that the metal inside their change was worth more than its face value, and this moment permanently reshaped the population of surviving Washington quarters, because countless examples were removed from circulation and destroyed, not for their history or design, but simply for their bullion content, unintentionally creating scarcity where abundance once existed, and this mass disappearance elevated the importance of those coins that escaped melting, especially higher-grade examples that had been set aside early by collectors, banks, or sheer chance, and this is where the Washington Quarter transforms from a historical coin into a study of survival economics, because its value today is shaped not only by age and rarity, but by human behavior, market psychology, and timing, and collectors who pursue the series quickly discover that completion is not about finding dates but about finding quality. Because while many dates remain obtainable in lower grades, coins with strong strikes, clean surfaces, and vibrant luster become exponentially rarer as grade increases, turning the hunt into a test of patience and knowledge, and this challenge is what sustains long-term interest in the series, because the Washington Quarter rewards those who look beyond mintage figures and price guides and instead study the coin itself, learning to recognize originality, detect cleaning, and appreciate subtle toning that enhances rather than detracts from eye appeal. And through this process, the quarter reveals its true depth, showing that even a coin once dismissed as ordinary can become extraordinary when examined through the lens of history, craftsmanship, and survival against the odds. The story of the Washington Quarter deepens even further when attention turns to the subtle details, varieties, and quiet complexities that transformed what many once considered an ordinary circulating coin into one of the most studied and respected long-running series in American numismatics, because beneath the surface of identical dates and mint marks lies a world of nuance shaped by mint practices, die preparation, metal flow, and changing priorities over decades of production, and this is where the quarter reveals its true character, as differences in strike sharpness, luster quality, and relief strength expose the realities of high-speed minting and the human decisions behind it, especially during periods of intense demand when efficiency mattered more than artistic perfection. And collectors who examine early issues closely often notice how the portrait of Washington varies from bold and sculptural in some years to flat and subdued in others, not due to intentional redesigns, but because of worn dies, metal fatigue, and pressure adjustments, and these inconsistencies are not flaws but fingerprints of history, evidence of how each coin was born under specific conditions that cannot be repeated, and as the series progressed through the mid-20th century, the Washington Quarter became increasingly affected by broader economic forces, particularly the rising value of silver, which quietly reshaped the destiny of millions of coins as hoarding intensified and melting removed vast quantities from circulation, forever altering survival rates and creating scarcity where none was expected, and this mass disappearance elevated the importance of condition and originality, turning well-preserved examples into prized survivors of an era when few imagined that everyday change would one day carry historical weight, and alongside standard issues, subtle varieties emerged through hub changes, die clashes, repunched mint marks, and production anomalies, each adding another layer of intrigue for specialists who understand that true rarity often hides in plain sight, and these varieties are not merely curiosities but windows into the evolution of minting technology itself, revealing how tools wore down, how engravers responded to limitations, and how production shortcuts left permanent marks on coinage. And this technical evolution becomes especially fascinating when comparing pre-war and post-war issues, where shifts in metal handling and machinery subtly altered the appearance and feel of the coin, even while the design remained outwardly unchanged. And this continuity amid change is what makes the Washington Quarter such a powerful teaching coin, because it demonstrates how stability and adaptation can coexist, preserving tradition while responding to necessity. And as collectors move deeper into the series, they begin to appreciate that the quarter's value is not confined to headline prices or famous dates, but lives in the cumulative story, told by thousands of small details, each coin a chapter in a narrative written over generations. And this understanding transforms the act of collecting from accumulation into exploration, where patience, observation, and respect for history unlock rewards far greater than monetary gain, making the Washington Quarter not just a collectible, but a lifelong study that continues to reveal new insights the more closely it is examined. As the Washington Quarter Dollar completes its long and remarkable journey through American history, its true importance becomes clear not only through dates, mint marks, or metal content, but through the way it quietly reflects the changing identity of a nation across generations, because this coin has lived through eras of hardship and prosperity alike, circulating during the Great Depression, World War II, the post-war boom, the cultural revolutions of the 20th century, and the technological transformations of the modern age, all while maintaining a familiar face that anchored everyday commerce to a shared historical memory. And as collectors today examine Washington Quarters from different decades, they are not simply comparing coins, they are comparing moments in time, where subtle differences in strike strength, surface quality, and die were reveal how urgently coins were produced, how carefully they were handled, and how priorities shifted within the U.S. Mint itself. And this is especially evident when studying high-grade survivors, because truly well-preserved Washington Quarters are far scarcer than their original mintages suggest, having endured decades of bulk storage, transportation, and circulation that left most examples marked, dull, or worn, which means that coins displaying sharp details, original luster, and clean surfaces represent not just condition but survival against overwhelming odds. And this scarcity is what drives intense collector interest, particularly for key dates, low mintage issues, and examples from mints known for weaker strikes, where finding a fully detailed coin becomes a genuine achievement. And beyond condition rarity, the series also captivates collectors through its evolving composition, as the transition from silver to clad coinage marked a turning point that separated the Washington Quarter into distinct historical chapters, with silver issues carrying intrinsic metal value tied to global markets and clad issues reflecting modern economic realities. And this divide influences how collectors approach the series, whether pursuing silver sets for their historic weight or focusing on modern varieties, errors, and high-grade registry quality coins. And yet, no matter the era, the Washington Quarter continues to teach the same fundamental lesson, that value is shaped by context, demand, and preservation rather than face value alone. And this is why auction results often surprise casual observers, as exceptional examples command astonishing prices, not because the coin itself was rare at birth, but because time has transformed it into something far more elusive. And among all Washington Quarters ever sold, the highest price ever paid for a single example reached over $143,000. A result that perfectly illustrates how a coin once used to buy a newspaper or a cup of coffee can become a six-figure treasure when history, condition, and collector passion align. And this realization is what continues to draw new enthusiasts into the world of numismatics, encouraging them to look more closely at the coins they hold, to ask questions, to study details, and to understand that even the most ordinary objects can carry extraordinary stories when viewed through the lens of time. And as long as the Washington Quarter remains studied, collected, and appreciated, its legacy will endure as a symbol of resilience, continuity, and the quiet power of history preserved in metal. Thanks for watching.